And yeah, it was an abusive childhood and violent, a lot of fear and a lot of stress and a lot of trauma. It was like number 1 daughter born, number 2 daughter born, number 3 daughter born. Ugh.
Can you explain what is a medium?
So medium is somebody who works with people who are passed over. So they work with the spirit world. Evidential mediumship is about giving you evidence of that person and specific incidents to confirm. So I was confirming, yes, I was there. Yes, that happened.
People have a lot of karmic debt in a sense. Everyone does have it. And sometimes pain kind of purifies it a lot. And then when it happens, then it hits a threshold where it triggers this kind of knowledge development where people then in a different path. The truth is, we are all students. The teacher learns from the student learns from the teacher. Both are evolving. It comes from a higher point of truth where you see that you are not the most important thing. You're just part of all this and just like playing your part, and based on how humble you are, it gives you more. This is part of Dreamer series, where we delve into human psychology to make sense of memories, ambition, purpose with real life stories. Today's guest is Sunita, a professional spirit medium who can channel energies beyond human comprehension. If you're curious about her life story, please watch till the end. And as you do it, feel free to subscribe. It means a lot to me. So what we're going to do is that we're going to start from the first memory in your life, and then we begin to build a thread from that first memory to where you are right now. Yes. So do you remember your first memory?
My first memory, I have a vivid memory of being asleep in the house that I was raised in, and there were 4 of us. And the Indian parents, we share rooms, and I remember being with my sister. Like my sister would be with me. She was older than me. Yeah. And we had in the bedroom, we had this pink, like a beauty box, like a toy, like with a little mirror and little drawers, a little cabinet, like, the girls like little, I don't know, it was like a little pink thing. And I used to put the little, open the little drawers and you had like the little mirror, oval mirror that you could like flick, and it was, she's like a toy thing.
And where is this happening? Where are you at this point?
Was in, so I was born in the UK. I was born in England. So this was and it was an old Victorian terraced house.
And do you remember exactly where it is in UK?
It was in the West Midlands.
Okay. And now at this point, you're with your parents and you have 3 sisters, right?
At that point, I had 2 sisters and 1 brother. At that point.
Okay, 2 sisters and 1 brother, and with your parents.
And then there was me,
Like, why did your parents choose to move?
Well, it was migrants, Indian parents, they go everywhere for work, right? For a better life. Everybody leaves India for a better life. Look at us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it makes sense.
It's a product of migration, right? So they moved to build a better life, to send money back to India, for them to have a better life too.
And what happened after that? So remember like being in UK with this family, and what would be your next memory? Is it like schooling? What happened after that?
Well, my childhood was pretty tough. It was my parents were, I would say, I think we have this way of minimizing our, especially when you're of Indian parents, can't speak for any other cultures, but Indian parents, they are very far different to way that you would say Westerners raise their children in terms of like, smacking them. And it was an abusive childhood and violent and a lot of fear and a lot of stress and a lot of trauma as a child growing up. And we were in a very strict parents, especially my father, very manipulative. And so we weren't allowed to do anything, and being the 3rd daughter, it was tough. It was basically, it was like number 1 daughter born, number 2 daughter born, number 3 daughter born. And it was like being raised with that constant, you're never going to amount to anything. Oh, the whole street cried, 3rd daughter. And that constant sense of like not being wanted. And it was the same. Like, it was different for each of the children. But yeah, it was pretty terrifying growing up. Not allowed to have any friends, not allowed to do anything creative. basically go to school, come back, that was it.
Yeah, and the expectation, I would say, would be very different. Like I've heard at least from back in time that Indian parents really wanted to have like a set of male offsprings, and that has been typically the stories moving around because they feel like, oh wow, this is going to be a carrier of my legacy in a
Oh,
sense.
100%.
Yeah, so it's kind of a tragic thinking back in time. And also I agree with like parents being a bit not abusive. I mean, some parents could be abusive, but also a bit violent. I think they are brought up in that kind of way where, like it's fear driven child, parenting. So they are not used to being very patient, sitting down with the child, understanding what the child is going through and trying to solve it. Yeah, so it's understandable. And like I want, before we go to the next memory, we would like to know, why do you feel like your parents were this kind of parents? Did you
Why do
ever, did you ever reflect on?
well, who knows why somebody turns to abusing their children? Like my father was abusive. He was an abuser. He assaulted us many times, and he was horrific. He was a manipulator. He was a narcissist, which are terms that we can remember now. But in my journey of healing the trauma and what I went through as a child up until my teens, it was horrendous. So it wasn't just a matter of parents beating their children. There was a lot more. So, who knows why they do these things? I mean, I think my father was a master at manipulation. So he manipulated my mother, but, my mother should have known better. My mother was very angry. I remember her always being very angry. And so she would be very, like take it out on us. My older sister, so we were brought up very differently. My older sister was the one that could do no wrong, and the younger sister. And then my brother obviously was a boy, so he basically got his get out of jail free card for anything that he did. So therefore, then there was the second sister and myself, the two, and and we were ostracized. We grew up being ostracized.
And what kind of jobs were they doing in their life?
My parents. So my mum was a stay-at-home mum, and she used to sew from home. So she was a very good seamstress. And my father ran his own business. He actually started working in a light industrial area. I'm not sure. I was just little. But eventually, he would have his own business. Like they run their own stores. They did markets. They did, progress from that to, and that's what a lot of Indians did. They would invest in a business, create a business. And so that's what I grew into, is like that business and help it. And so as children, it was like there was no social time. It was like, especially as girls, we weren't allowed to have friends. We just weren't allowed to have friends. And so any after school, all of the energy was poured into why you're not helping, so you grew up with your term breaks and your summer holidays, just completely doing whatever the parent, so you're helping out constantly.
And from your point of view, how was London back in time? Was it like welcoming to people from abroad?
London?
London, not London exactly, UK.
Oh, UK. How was it? No, it was extremely racist. Extremely racist. The usual story: migrants taking our jobs scenario.
So it's been going on forever.
It's been going on for centuries. Yeah. So we're living the dream. So and what happens is culturally you grow up. You're an Indian communities, obviously migrant communities. Again, can't speak for them, but Indian communities, wherever they land, they will go towards their own and will kind of create like things that are similar, familiar for their own culture. And so, whereas my parents were a little bit different. They didn't want us to live in the Indian areas. So I grew up in a lot of Western areas. So it was anytime there was a community that built up of Indians, we would move. And it was interesting.
They wanted to integrate in as much as possible.
No, they just, what we used to hear my dad say was, we don't want to live by them because they just talk about you and you talk about your business.
They may be more critical in a sense with how other families live, which is crazy, which makes sense as well. Then what happened? So imagine, what age are you at this now in your head?
Teens. And then eventually, through my own understanding of what was happening to me growing up as a teenager with all of the abuse and just, we were so restricted. I mean, it was horrendous, like socially, emotionally, mentally. There was a lot of stress and it was just awful. And I went through a lot. And then my older sister got married and she'd actually run away from home a couple of times. She was really unhappy and, they found her and brought her back and then arranged marriage to her straight away. And she was a scapegoat, unfortunately. And then when she went through her marriage breakdown, her husband was abusive. He was a drunk. He was violent. So there's a lot of domestic violence happening there. And my parents blamed her. And it was completely opposite of what you see Bollywood, for example, or people going on about, the daughters and blah, blah, blah. When my parents were the opposite, they literally pointed the finger at my sister and vilified her and said it was her fault. So it was
Before we jump to tea, I would like to go a bit systematically on because I would like to understand where you're coming from. How was your schooling? You remember back in time you were in a school, did you have friends?
At school, I had friends at school. I was kind of one of these people, and this is teens because my sister was married in my teens, and I was very much an observer of the cliques and the groups around, and I observed, these are the popular kids, these are the kind of nerds that hang out in the library, these are the ones that do all the academic work, these are the ones that get into a lot of trouble. And my life in school was observing each of the cliques, and I could see, especially, I was quite drawn to the ones that everybody picked on, and I would always make a point of saying hello to them, making them feel comfortable in the uncomfortableness, because it was quite awful if you're bullied. I wasn't bullied or anything, but I kind of managed to stay out of everything. I don't know how I did.
Yeah, but you had, as I hear it, you had compassion towards people getting bullied, so would like to make them feel better.
Totally.
And what was your interest back in time when you were a kid? What was the interest?
I loved dancing. I loved music. I loved dancing. I loved all the creative things. Unfortunately, that isn't what my parents loved, and they weren't happy and didn't allow me to do any of those things. I loved netball. I loved hockey. I was in the team. I was in the choir. I wasn't allowed to do anything after a certain age. I don't know what the age was. It was early teens, and so it was kind of all of those creative things that I really was interested in was just no. And that's a very standard for Indian parents, isn't it? They don't value creativity and art. It's always well, they never said be a doctor or a lawyer, but it was never what are you going to do. It was always what are you going to do with that. What are you going to play an instrument for?
Yeah, and also I feel with the Indian parents especially, they care a lot about how external world sees the child, because it equals somehow to the parents and the family, and they would like to build that value. My child is performing so well because their parents are so good. So we feel kind of better than maybe at least a few of others. So it's always the case with, I don't know if it's the case with all parents, but at least Indian parents, they definitely think like that. What happened after that? So what was your teenage like?
So that was my teenage years. That was pretty much my teenage years. I loved languages. I did French and German. I loved English. So I did English literature as well as English language. Well, English language is compulsory, but I took those extra options. So wasn't a maths person. Oh my goodness. So very much the arts,
And what do you want to become at that time?
I wanted to travel. I wanted to be on I wanted to be on cabin crew, and I wanted to be cabin crew. And so what happened? One of my favorite moments was in my upper school. Was we have to do work experience, and I expressed this is what I want to do, and they actually managed to arrange work experience for a week at the airport. So I had the week off, and I was the first person that they'd actually allowed at the airport to ever have work experience. It was so it was a new thing. And so I remember my headmaster principal saying to me, that, you know, you're the first person going as a representative from this school. And that's all he said. And so when I came back after the week, it was absolutely amazing. I just loved stewardesses. They were always so beautiful, and they were flawless, you know, and they had their hair tied back and their uniform and their little, like, those necktie things. And they still wear them, you know, and they just looked immaculate with their little, you know, and they're like, chuk, chuk, you know, and I was just in awe. I just thought they were beautiful. And I never thought I was pretty enough. I never thought I was good enough. I never thought I was like, you know, I could never do this. So I felt great that I was behind the scenes at an airport. That was exciting. And then when I came back to school a week later, all the teachers were like nodding at me, even ones that I didn't know. And they were like, oh, well done, well done. They had good reports of how amazing I was, you know, because I was dead. You know, it was amazing. So that was a highlight of my school.
And what age are you at right now? Is it like 15,
that would have been 16? Yeah, 16. Yeah, whatever that. Yeah.
And what happened after that time? Did you have to choose what you're going to do for uni, or like?
Yeah, so I was kind of confused as to, like, I like variety, and I was drawn to like whatever I studied, I needed to have variety. And I remember being made to feel also like I failed. I didn't have good enough grades. And remembering that at this point, we were never allowed to go study anywhere else, and studying at home was really hard because you were looking after the house and siblings and working in the bit, you know, helping out parents constantly. That there was a lot of pressure on performing. You know, you were beaten if you got bad results, you know, or perceived bad results, you know. So that was really, really difficult. And then, so of course, I remember when my results came through, the yelling and everything that happened, and I can still remember it, you know, the scolding and the taunts about how I'd wasted all my school years and what did I think I was doing, and I was probably hanging around with boys, and because that's what it was always about, that we were always going to, as girls, we were always going to do something wrong to shame the family. That's how we were raised. It was horrible. It was horrible. You had no self-confidence, nothing. And I remember thinking, obviously, I was going to go to college and further studies, but it was kind of, what do I choose to do? And I was interested in business. So I actually did a 1-year certificate course, even though I had to get approval from the college to let me do it because I was overqualified. Like, I had more results, higher marks than for the next one, which was a 2-year. But in my mind, I was like, well, what if I'm wasting my 2 years? Like, I'm going to know soon if I don't like it. I would rather do the 1-year certificate and then know, yes, this is definitely, and then at least I get a certificate. And if I don't like it, it's just a year, and then at least I've got a certificate, than doing 1 year out of a 2-year course and then getting scolded badly for failing and wasting my time, you know? So of course I really enjoyed it and flew through it because it was like, obviously my capacity was higher than the training, but I loved the variety. And then I did the 2 years, and then from there I went to uni. So I went from I did business. So by the time I was ready for uni, I loved English. I loved law. I loved marketing. So I was either like, I'm going to be I want to be a teacher, teach English, or I want to do a business degree, or I want to do law, because I had an aptitude for law. You know, people can be quite intimidated by those thick, old, you know, the legal text and everything's obviously, the statute is always British law, even in Australia, you know, the old.
Why do that? So,
yeah. There's a lot of statute because obviously when Australia, you know, was colonized, it came over, right, the legal system, and now obviously it's a little bit different. But I had an aptitude for law. I really loved marketing. So I chose a business degree. Absolutely. It was a business entrepreneur degree. So it was different to business studies. So it was a new degree where you had a placement again. So it was that real entrepreneur skills and that I thrived in, and the variety of different subjects. Again, accounting, economics, really didn't like. But the marketing, advertising, law, we did contract law. I also opted to do another language as an extra unit, and I did business German. Yeah. So loved it.
And this is all happening in UK. So you're still living in UK at this point.
Still in the
Right?
UK, yeah. When I started uni, yeah.
And as a young person who is striving to get into a field, do you actively think about life? As in, not just with your parents, about yourself. What is your identity like at this point?
I just
What
wanted
do
to
you feel about?
Yeah, I just wanted to be free because
You just wanted to be free.
I just wanted to be free. Like the pressure at home, the stress at home, I couldn't study. Uni is all about doing teamwork. It's about doing group work. I had placements and having to not being allowed to stay out. So even using, libraries, and I had to be home for a certain time. And, and it was really difficult, and it was really stressful. The pressure of getting married.
And what age is this? I mean, back it
Oh,
is still back in time.
19.
That's crazy. Yeah. And the
19.
parents are like, you have to get married at 19, which is
Because the thing is, as soon as you start to leave school, that's all they're thinking about. Well, okay, what's she going to do? And then it was literally all about having an education and then getting married. So at that point, that's where I was at. Or I would say I was dodging the bullet with my family at most of the time. Dodging the bullet, and really stressful. And it was at this point that I kind of started to have a dual life. So, at college, I would still had a different friends group where it was more doable to have a social life, but in the day, because we weren't allowed to do anything at night. And just starting to have a little bit more freedom, but the tyranny was still going on in the home place. So and so I would spend a lot of time in nature before I would go home, just to prepare myself mentally for what I had to be and do when I was at home.
It's crazy that since you were born in UK and you're living in that society, which is very different from compared to Indian way of doing things, you could see the contrast in leaving. Like you can see, like, oh wow, this kids who is in UK has a lot of freedom. Their family works in a certain way. Then I come back home and it's extremely strict.
That's right.
I would say if for a lot of people back home, like India, born and brought up, especially if it's women, they don't question a lot about their freedom in a sense, because mostly if you look around in society, it all is very uniform. Things are done in a very uniform way, so they don't really, maybe some definitely stands up and says like, okay, we need freedom, but most of them would be like, this is how it's done, this is how always been the way, and we just have to live in it. So it's now you are in university or college, and what is happening there? So how is your studies going? How is your friends around?
Well, because I was balancing having a social life and a life, so I learned very quickly how much I needed to do to get good grades. So I think I could have been an A grade student, but because I was too busy also having a life and experiencing some freedom, that I wasn't a B grade, wasn't an A grade student, but I was quite happy with my distinctions and high distinctions. Do you know what I mean? So I often think, had I had a more supportive environment to study, and bearing in mind that I couldn't study at home because there was so much to do, and even at exam times, even when I would be up at 2 a.m., I remember my mum saying, "What are you doing up at 2 a.m.?" I'm like, "Well, I've just had to do the whole house stuff and help in the shop. So when did you think I was going to study for my exams? Because you don't let me stay in the library till late with my friends group, my peer group. So it's very isolating, very, very isolating. But
can I ask you, like, what year is this in?
I can't tell you that.
Yeah. So it's still a few decades back, right?
Still a few decades. I don't know how old you think I am.
No, not in a bad way. I just want to say, like, how the world was at that time, back in time.
I guess, at that point, literally at uni, I met my then to be future partner, and I left the UK at that point. So that part of my life was gone.
Okay.
doesn't exist for me anymore. So that's even talking to you about it now. These are things that are just things that happen. There's a lot more, ultimately living and being raised in in a family in the way that I was raised. And, and it was very different for my eldest sister, my youngest sister, and my brother, me and the second child, like I said, we were ostracized. We were the black sheep of the family. I moved to Australia. They disowned us,
And what time? So you were, say, like 18 when you moved to
No,
Australia?
no. So I was at uni when I was 19. So I moved probably not long after that.
Okay, it's quite young, quite young. And I would like to know, how did you meet your partner?
Uni. It was my last day. It was the last day at uni for me for what I was doing, because I was doing I'd finished my degree. I'd done a year after, like I was in a program for students, postgraduate, kind of like a skills enhancing kind of setup. And I had some work experience at my uni, and it was the last day of term at the end of the year, and we were having drinks in the bar.
Met you, yeah.
And it was
and how
actually
did we-
his, and it was actually his dream to, because he had family over in New South Wales, and it was actually his dream to come over to Australia. But he wasn't qualified enough, and by at that stage I was qualified, super qualified. So yeah, I mean, in our relationship, he's an English guy, to the complete disappointment of my parents, especially my father, and wouldn't agree to it. And then, so I just left home. We got married and moved over. That was it. Full stop.
Yeah, and I think that requires a lot of courage as well, to move when you're 19 to a whole different continent and live there. So at 19, you moved to Australia.
The continent wasn't the hard part. It was telling them about the white man that was the hard part. As an Indian woman who was going to marry a white man, because that's all they said. They couldn't see beyond the color, and they disowned me. So it wasn't fun. It was horrendous, because all of your life you're brought up that your family is important. Your family is important. There's nothing more important than your family. But just like that, they drop you, which is what happened.
It's quite a surprise in a way that, this is from my point of view, that people who are older, you expect them to be more understanding of the world because they have seen more of the world, right? But what happens is usually that they have seen more of the world, but their radical views have most probably tightened up.
Yeah. What was interesting about my family, though, you got to remember, even when I hear other people talking about their Indian parents, my family were very different. They weren't supportive of their daughters. Like, my sister, who was in a violent marriage and they ended it, she was vilified and disowned because she refused to come home with her son, because they told her that you could come back home for a couple of years and then we'll find you somebody from India to get married. Because always that burden approach. And so we were both disowned, and which drew us very close together. And we were close anyway, but it just drew us because we were it. So we had our own little world happening. And I also had this opinion that I don't even understand how you could just disown your children. And they were very, the issue was that didn't want to integrate. And my father actually said, I said, what did you expect us to do? We're in schools next to white people. And then I said, so we're with them, we're eating, Western food, we're in their Western culture. And I'm, you're this brown person born in a different country. So what are you supposed to do? I said, well, you shouldn't have come. You should have stayed in India. I actually said, you should have stayed in India. And he said, I remember in this argument, my dad said to me, I expected you to sit next to them at the table and eat next to them, but not marry them.
It's always pride getting on the way of
totally
logic and social value, how people see me and my family. Always the case.
What was interesting was that relatives were supportive and saying, look, she's chosen somebody, just go ahead with it. You get them married, do the right thing. So it was actually, that was our own relatives saying that, and advising my parents, but they just wouldn't have a bar of it. So it was like they lost out ultimately on 2 daughters. So and then it was like, goodbye. Hello, Australia.
Hello, Australia. So, what was the plan when you were thinking about Australia? Like, what kind of life were you thinking about?
Just somewhere, it's just having somewhere where there was more opportunities. I didn't have any other kind of idea in my mind. It was just more opportunities. But what those opportunities look like, I didn't have like a picture in my mind. And I didn't kind of have an idea. And when you migrate to another country and you completely leave and sell everything that you have, except for obviously we ship some things over, the important stuff, but it was bizarre. You don't know anywhere, you don't know anybody. But I do remember one thing, and I do know one thing, and I still feel the same, that as soon as the moment came that I got off the plane and my feet, it was a Shah Rukh Khan moment. You know that moment, right? Where he gets off the helicopter and his feet touch the ground, and it was like, when I was like, oh, I've come. This is where I'm meant to be.
Yeah, I have landed in my dream land.
Yeah, yeah. And I always felt like that. I always feel, and it is my home. Like, I don't like the UK. I don't like anything that it represents. I feel there is such a lack of freedom there. I feel very free here. I feel very free in not only in like space, as in like we're a continent, right? We're a continent. We're huge, and it's very isolated. Like WA, Western Australia, Perth is considered to be the loneliest, most isolated city in the whole world. Perfect for me. I like my own company. I'm very, I'm kind of one of these people where wherever you go, you are home. It's not the people, it's not the building, it's you. And I feel very at home with myself. So for me, you can kind of just go anywhere. I can go anywhere.
And I tell you, like, some places have that kind of influence, like you're meant to be there. Some kind of energy that you feel like, wow, I just landed back to home, but I have never been here before, at least in this life.
Totally.
So
totally. And I really felt like that in my heart, and it was a relief. It was such a relief. And I knew I would make, it would all flow. Everything would work. It would work. It would just be okay. Like, I just knew. If I'd had any doubts, I would have said, I don't want to move to Australia. But I'm quite a, like, open person. Like, if somebody said to me now, or, there was an option to move somewhere else, I would consider it. I wouldn't go, no, it's only this place. That's it. I'm not moving.
That's the thing about young people. They have so much courage in them, which also is equal to not overthinking. They're like, let's go here. Let's find the opportunity. Let's make a life.
Yeah.
When you're a bit more older, it's impossible because you have seen more of the world and you overthink. Like, is it possible? Will I be able to survive? Will I, find someone who I know from this place? So it's
it's free thinking and like, I consider myself to be a free spirit, and it's kind of freeing myself of everything that I've experienced and the childhood that I experienced and those things, and not for them to hold me back in experiencing life to the fullest in the moment that in the time period, in the moment, in the space that I am. Like, I understand now, looking back, that that's always been something, and wanting to be always drawn to nature. I do specifically have memories of, like, like I said to you before going home, where it was very oppressive, that I would sometimes pull up the car in that journey and there was beautiful nature spots, and I would sit there for a while just so I could gather myself. And it was almost like so that I could deal with what I had to deal with and deal with them. Because I felt like
I would say is like that is one of the strongest healers. You sit there and your energy building inside, it gets taken away. So it's I understand why people go and sit in the nature, because they want to get it off their body.
Yeah. And balance. And it's kind of recalibrating and almost, I tell you what it did do for me, it was almost like it gave me strength. It gave me the strength to go into imagine, like, I was still studying, like you're going from lectures and you're doing, assignments and reading and so that was mental gymnastics and emotionally and physically draining as well. And then I had to go home to a mentally, where there was a lot of fear, where you would just get through it to get out. It was like, get there by 4 or 5 o'clock and then leave in the morning to get out, and like almost like a geddi, right? So I was a prisoner. And that's how I felt most of my adult life. Well, my child life, my life with my parents.
And what happened after that? So you met your love of your life at that time. How was the relationship like as an 19-year-old moving to a new place?
It was interesting because he had a lot of anxiety, and he had an alcohol issue, which I obviously didn't know about, because it was not on my list of top 2 things that I wanted in a guy. He's a drug user and he's got alcohol issues, which he hid very well. So they started to come out later on in the relationship, and after, I just, it wasn't something that I wanted to be involved in. I don't take drugs. I'm a social drinker. I don't even, I don't drink anymore, and not that I drank a lot anyway, but, and, and it became volatile, and his coping mechanism was drinking,
Yes,
and it's a toxic, and his father was an alcoholic. His family, those addiction tendencies were in there as well, and so, ended up leaving that relationship. And then there was it was kind of like a huge healing time. And I would say that going at that point in my life, has to be that kind of, because it's, if you've experienced living with somebody who's got addictions, alcohol addictions, and, and I didn't know the drug addictions, because, people, they lie. There's a key behavior in addictions is that they're liars. And so they will lie about where they are, what they're doing, and about money, So it's very destabilizing, because that's obviously what my childhood was like, very destabilizing as well. So, and I could see the pattern of, abusive parents, abusive father, an abusive husband, and then,
So you're still in Australia at this time?
Oh, yeah.
And you're trying to make a life in this new land. What were you doing at that time?
So I was, I was working in corporate, and so I fell into this corporate work, right? Not that, obviously the dream of being a stewardess, a cabin crew was long gone, because my parents weren't going to let me out after dark. So there's no way that I was going to be able to get a flight to anywhere, right? Around the car park, maybe. But so after all the business degrees and all of those, I kind of fell into government work. And I have a skill set, I have an aptitude for processing big documents and information. So my corporate career, which started around contracts and contract management and quality assurance and contract management, all those kinds. So because you've got this thick government contract, and you've got suppliers, and then the audit started happening. So my corporate career is all around has been all around risk management, contract management, auditing, internal auditing, quality assurance, and I loved it because it was digesting. And so I was very lucky enough. I say luck, come on, it's not luck, it's actually brains, right, and acumen. But I don't know what I'm saying luck for. That's an Indian way of saying things. Oh, I was just got lucky. No, I worked really hard. I did my master's while I was through work. They sponsored for higher education. So I was like, oh yeah, because I love studying. I'm a nerd. I love I just love learning.
You had the freedom. So now you're choosing life. And that gives a lot of, motivation to focus on things.
Yeah. So and what was really great was, when you're doing a master's and it's through work, you're using your live work situations as part of the kind of assignment work. And I remember one of the reasons I didn't do my English degree was that whole thing of, because I did start to teach business as well, by the way, but I was like, you know what? You're just going from school to uni to teach about business when you've actually haven't been in the business world. Like, what do you know about it? You're just an eternal student. You're just the other side of the desk. And I was like, that's just rubbish, because you need life experience and life skill, to be able to authentically teach. And but doing that master's, I remember, was a real, I can do this, I can do this. And I did. I have the acumen for it. So did that. And then I would still be hungry to look for other qualifications to do. I was like, oh, I'd love to do another degree. Don't know what for, but maybe to the experiencing, actually enjoying it, as opposed to surviving through it. As a ticket. It was my golden ticket. A, to not get married, and B, it leveraged me into, because when you work in government, public servants, if you want to get up a certain level, you have to have tertiary qualifications. So it was really interesting that the work that I did, again, being the only woman of colour in the room, there was an assumption that I was the admin or the note taker, as opposed to the chair, because I was the operations manager, or I was the auditor, or I was the one sitting in front of the CEO, and it was really interesting. Because they'd look at me and go, and I would be in reception, and say, I've got a meeting with so-and-so, and then I would so many times hear the reception staff and the, admin staff saying, oh yes, we've got the auditor coming in at 9:30. Yeah. And they had no idea that it was me, because I never used to flaunt the status and the title, and they would come out to see me and they go, and you could see their faces just dropping, that it's her.
They were not expecting that.
Unexpected on many levels, and also being personable and making people feel comfortable, because you get the most out of people when they're feeling relaxed.
Yes.
And changing that scenario of that narrative that an auditor is somebody that's going to beat you over the head with a stick. So I gained a lot of respect in my corporate career, not just amongst like our contractors who I was auditing, but also in the executive teams. And I kind of made the decision, being middle management, there was only one way up. And those people were kind of just zombies, 12-hour days, mainly this certain, age of male that were in those positions. And still, it's still the same. Women in corporate sector, women in government, cutthroat. Yeah. And ended up, life things happened. My sister was killed in a car accident, and just a tragic, time in my life. And I started that hernia healing
Before
journey.
we go into that, I would like to know when is this happening? So you moved to Australia. You are working for, I'm assuming, a period of time.
Yes,
And then you're hearing about the accident that happened to your
that's right.
sister.
Yeah. And so, and that was it. So I was working, and so the calling to go back to never expecting her to die.
How many years has it been now in Australia?
So it had been not long after, probably 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd quite gotten used to, just having the phone call. There was no contact from any other family members. So we were and then it was like, yeah.
And when you say sister, is it your oldest sister?
This is the two of us that were like this. So this was her.
Okay. So it's like the second one.
Second eldest.
Or like,
yeah.
And then what happened? You went back to UK?
Went back to the UK. She never gained consciousness. She had the car accident on the Saturday. I found out on Sunday. I left on Monday, got there on Tuesday. She died by the Friday. She never regained consciousness. Yeah, she was very seriously, broken body.
And what kind of impact did it have on you as a person?
Absolutely broke me. Broke me. She was it. She was my, what I realized was my soulmate. We had such a close relationship. We had a very intuitive relationship. We were very deeply connected. Even when she was disowned by my parents, I would still see her, because I was like, why would I not see my sister? And so I would secretly see her. But also for me, she was never disowned, whereas the others didn't really have much to do with her either, through their own choices. and they're, and so completely changed my life. It's the most pivotal period, losing her in my life, and it was just
And at that time, what was your thinking about death as something happening?
Never thought about it. I mean, I'd experienced death. Like my nana died when I was 16. I remember observing like my mum at that point, but again, they were in India, so I never, even though I had a lot of love for them and we'd met them 2-3 times, it was distant. So she was my first experience of death. So I remember when I came back home, I really questioned everything. Where is she? Where do you go when you die? All of those things.
And so now you are in UK mourning over your sister's passing. What happened after that? So what was the shift in yourself, or did you take a different path after that?
So there was a lot of things, because I was executor of her estate, and there was a lot of things I had to sort out. And when I came back home several months later, I actually was given, my work had given me kind of leave without pay. They were really, really good. And when I went back, there was a staff member that said, "Here, go and see this woman." And I'd had a lot of experiences. That's all I can say. I'd had a lot of visions. I had a lot of intuitive experiences. I had a lot of sensing that she was there, but I couldn't understand it. And came back home. I had that phone number of that lady, booked an appointment, didn't know who she was. She said, "Oh, she'll be able to help you. She's a medium."
Give me moments just to clarify. So this happened and you started having this kind of experiences, certain kind of feelings that she's around you, and your intuition kind of sharpened, most probably because of the emotional turbulence in your body. But then where did you hear about this woman?
So the visions and things were happening during when she was passing. At the moment of her death, there was a huge moment where she came to say goodbye just before her soul left her body. She was already in transition. So I understand now, obviously afterwards, as I started my own journey. So the woman's phone number that I was given by somebody at work was when I came back to Australia, when I came back home. So it was, so I booked to see her several months later, and she was a medium. She's a medium, and she highlighted, she gave to me all of the times where I'd experienced and sensed my sister being there, and moments where I was like, I can feel her, but I don't know how I can feel her. I can sense her, but I don't know how I can. And so Christine Morgan is her name. She was able to, she just confirmed all these.
Just a second. Can you explain what is a medium for people who's listening?
Yeah. So medium is somebody who works with people who have passed over. So they work with the spirit world. So so this was 6 months. 6 months after my sister had passed. And so Christine was able to pick up, and evidential mediumship is about giving you evidence of that person and specific incidents and to confirm. So I was confirming, yes, I was there. Yes, that happened. Yes, we were like this. Yes, she was like this. So it's called evidential medium. So pieces of evidence. And she confirmed all the times of when I'd sensed her as well. Every single time I'd sensed her, she said, "Your sister's telling me about this. Your sister's telling me about this." And it was all the time. And there were some moments that were just only I knew. I was only me in the room,
So she could kind of, without asking you when this happened, she could sense that this have happened with you and the spirit world, right?
Yeah. Well, my sister was working through her to tell Christine, tell Sunita, I saw what she did. Tell Sunita, I see. Yeah. And so that's how it works. That's what mediumship is about.
Okay, please continue. Very exciting. Please continue. So what happened? So you talked to the medium,
Then that was my reading. So in my head, I'm like, I don't even know what's going on, but I also kind of know it's I get it, but I didn't know how I got it. And then at the end of the reading, she said, I know all of that. I already knew it was true. And she said, "Yes, because you're a medium." And I was like, yeah, no, that doesn't sound like it's far off the truth either. But I also don't know what that properly means, and I don't really know what that means. You know, it was just my head was, if you can imagine, you know, and they were big moments. That evidence that she gave me, they were big moments. I was in shock. And she said, "Oh, I run workshops. And I'll let you know when I run my first one."
Okay.
And then probably 6 weeks later, she was running the next workshop, and it was a day workshop, and off I went. Had no idea what to expect, what to do, and that was the beginning of my development. It's what we call it in the mediumship world is we call it the unfolding of your development. So she's a teacher. She was a teacher.
And when you say workshop, it means a place where you come in contact with a teacher and she explains the methods on how to make it happen.
That's right.
Okay, continue,
and
please.
we do exercises, and so there were other people there, obviously. And then, so it was a day, and we would have exercises to do, psychic exercises, intuitive exercises. And I was just doing them. So, you know, you're working with other people, you're partnering up with other people, and she'd say, right, you're going to do this. And so I'd be writing in my notebook, and then I was like getting things right. And I didn't know how I was getting things right. I was like, this is insane. But it didn't feel like I couldn't do it, or I didn't know how to do it. It felt like I just could always do it. But now my brain was understanding that I could do it. You know, does that make sense? It was just bizarre.
Yeah.
So I kind of was like, it was like my brain was catching up with another part of me that was totally knew that they
Always
could do.
been there.
Yeah.
It was that's the thing. Like what I understood is more like if you're very sensitive as a person, in this code, sensitive means like very different things. But there are people who are sensitive to energies. And for that, you need to have certain level of purity in your actions and your heart, and very self-reflective as well. So you can differentiate between your own thoughts and other things that comes to you, because you are very close to your own thoughts. And then you pick up like, this is not my thought, or this is not me, there is something else. And then you build on that. But it has always been there.
Yeah. And like you said, you know, I know in reflection, when I reflect on my development journey, I go, I was journaling, Pranoy, from the age of 11. Like I remember journaling when I was 11. And I used to write poetry, or I would write my thoughts, and I would have those, you know, I would just be drawn to just writing. And so I was doing it for a long time. And it was, like you said, that reflection time, even those moments in nature were also, I would write. So I was doing a lot of these things for a long time, naturally drawn to them. I remember experiencing spirit growing up and seeing spirit. But in a child, it's like, if I don't know that you can't do it, I think that everybody can see them. Do you know what I mean? So I grew up like that. So learning with a teacher helped me to, like I said, for the brain to catch up to what I already knew. That's the best way to describe it, because it was phenomenal. And it was literally like, you know, if I could say a balloon, you've blown a balloon, and then you've popped it, and then everything just opened up. I could see so much and sense so much. It was like, you know, the movie X-Men. It was like, it was just like, and I was like, this is so great, because it was being harnessed. That intuitive muscle, the psychic muscle, was just being guided to develop, to being used, and how to use it and what to do with it. So it was phenomenal time for me, and I was so hungry to learn.
And I want to make a point, like usually this happens from my point of view. People have a lot of karmic debt in a sense. Everyone does have it. And sometimes pain kind of purifies it a lot. And then when it happens, then it hits a threshold where it triggers this kind of knowledge development, where people are then in a different path. But continue, please.
No, and that's exactly what happened. It was like, you know, this path that I was going down, happy along corporate career, happy career, then it was like, boom, no. And so I never left my work because I didn't like it. I left it because I knew the calling, my soul calling and spiritual calling was to work and do what I do. And so, you know, I remember after my third workshop, she said, well, yeah, you know, you need to get up and give healing. And I remember going, I don't even know what that is,
How does that? How do I do
I
that?
just, okay. And then so I just copied what other people do, which was, there's a method and we get up and stand behind the other person, we're giving them healing. But I remember like the senses, the metaphysical senses that just opened up were phenomenal and it was beautiful. And I know there's a trait in me that I'm so grateful for. And I don't know how I have that, like where it came from, but I feel so blessed to have it, is that I always trusted. I never expected. And because what I saw a lot of people do was they'd come and go in workshops and it was like, I want to be a medium and I want to be clairvoyant or I want this skill. I'm like, you don't choose. It's like you have to be an open book and allow to be worked on.
Just want to make it clear for the people who's listening, clairvoyant means seeing the future or ability to see events going to happen.
And it's actually not just about the future. Clairvoyance is about the seeing, the sight, the anya. And it's about that, to be able to see. And I'm talking psychically as well as a medium. And there's different aspects of clairvoyance. So it is the seeing sense of the visual. So for example, I could say, Pranoy, I can see this around you and I could physically see it or objectively or subjectively see it. Yeah. And so it was about that sight, the sight opening up. And futuristic information, interestingly, and this is where clairvoyants and psychics get, it's a misunderstanding that you are only ever given futuristic information if it is needed.
Exactly.
And it happens in flashes. And I know when it happens, and I know I have to give it, as with all of my information, but it only happens for a reason. Otherwise, can you imagine the chaos in the world?
It's going to happen. Yeah. I feel like, for example, if you think in a way, we have a consciousness in the mind. Like, like the mind itself is in a part of consciousness. And there is a much bigger mind that you could tap into. But that has a plan for everything and everyone. And then doesn't want people to play around with that. So if this kind of flashes of future changes the trajectory of someone's life more towards what the plan is, then it gives you.
Exactly. And you will have heard this classic thing where, if she's psychic, why doesn't she have the lotto ticket numbers? And I'm like, because money is nothing.
It's not a thing. Exactly.
It's not. And I'm like, because being rich, and I call like doing this work and working with people and even like helping people is where I get my spiritual credits from, where I gain my credits for, it's not about money. We need money to survive. We need money to buy food. We need, that's all part of life because we're living in the material world, but it's not about it. And you're so right. That futuristic information only happens. Can I share a story about this?
Please.
It was so amazing. And it was only like, I don't say it's so amazing because I think it was amazing, but I'll tell you the story. So I was demonstrating in mediumship at Every Woman Expo, which is an annual event that happens, women's event, obviously, Every Woman Expo last year. And it was the year before. And I was demonstrating mediumship, which means I'm on stage and there's an audience, and it means I'm publicly demonstrating and getting links from people who have passed over for audience members. I don't know who these people are, right? So there was a lady in the audience and can't remember who it was because there's no way I would ever remember all the details, but it was somebody that came for her family member, and the family member said that she wasn't happy. I think it was a mother. She said that she wasn't happy about what was happening in the family at the moment, that people weren't speaking to each other and there was disharmony and discord between the siblings. And I think it was a mum. She was not happy and things needed to be mended. And she was nodding and nodding, and it was a mother and a daughter. And she said, I don't know. I said, I don't want to know. Like, this is your business. I don't need to know. I'm just the message giver, And it was it was a very powerful message in terms of the way it came through. All of them are, but this one I remember because of what happened the year later. So it was all about fixing this issue, and the brother was interstate. So all this information was correct. The lady verified it. And then she said, I said, there's going to be communication from your sibling. It's going to happen and things are going to change in 3 months. I said, I'm giving you what's going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. The following year, so last year, they came back to see me. They were in the audience and they came to speak to me after the demonstration. They said, do you remember? Of course, I vaguely remember their faces. I never remember the stories. So they're refreshing my mind. And she said, you said this was going to happen and this was what I had to do. And I didn't know. There was such a big discourse in the family. She didn't know. There was no point talking to them. But the mum was telling her, you have to fix it. You're going to fix it. You're going to fix it. She said, you know what happened within that 3 months? 3 months later, I found out my nephew, so the brother wasn't speaking to her, but his son had a private investigator to find his aunt, who was the woman in my audience. And he got in touch within that 3 months and they reunited. And it was amazing because the mother in spirit world was saying, you have to reconnect to the family. You have to bring the connection. You have to be with those children, the nieces and nephews. And she said, it was because of you. And I remembered that you said this, that there was going to be a mending happening. She couldn't think of how that was going to happen at that moment, but there was already something else happening. And it was the nephew that had a private investigator to find his aunt. Incredible, right? And she said, and then it all came back to me, what you said. I remember that moment that you said that this was going to happen, and he found me, and I'm so grateful. And now I have this beautiful relationship with my nephew that I wouldn't have had. You know, I would have rejected it potentially, but you told me that somebody was going to get in touch. And it was beautiful.
And the thing from the way you explain, and also this is like my personal experience as well, is that when people look at people who could feel these things, they look at them as a person. They're like, oh, this is coming out of this person. But the truth is, it's not coming straight from the person. There is elements of the person, but it's also coming from a very higher level where the information is moving. And that is what people forget. People get stuck at the face.
Yeah. And I always say the spirit world is this consciousness that is a giant orchestra. And you can only see the instruments that are playing in front of you, but you don't know where the other notes are coming from to create this beautiful symphony that you are hearing. And I am just the conduit of the message. And it was for her to be open and to watch 3 months, something was going to happen. So when that contact happened, she was so happy, you know, and it was beautiful. It was that, you know, you unite people, you know, and it was just meant to be that was meant to happen for her and that family, you know.
And it might be their time to start understanding this kind of world does exist.
Exactly.
And that is another thing, like, it is not people's choice. For example, you were saying about a client coming and saying like, oh, I need clairvoyance. The truth is, the other side chooses people. You cannot choose that.
No.
It's always the case. It's more, and that's why it's hard to explain to people, because it's not your choosing. You become self-reflective. You try to purify your life. When time is right, things comes to you. And then you would be in a mindset where you can read this and you will like, wow, this is speaking. The world is speaking to me, and it is very clear if you know how to read it.
Exactly. It's I can't even begin to explain like the language, because it's pure sense. It's pure sensing and decoding, you know, the messages and information, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful vibration to be able to be a part of that, you know, to be able to receive that. And I always thank myself. I thank myself for not expecting this and not expecting that. I'm like, even now when I do my work, I feel it's a blessing, and I feel humbled. And I walk away sometimes when I'm working with clients or when I've done a demonstration or worked with people, and I think, thank you.
And that is a good thing. Like when I talked to you last time, that's one thing I stick to my mind, is that you're very humble and open for knowledge. Like I talked to a different person after that, and he was claiming to be in going to Himalayas, meeting all the gurus. The moment I talked to him, I understood like he's so stubborn from his point of view. He believes like this is the absolute truth, and I am the teacher, you are the student. The truth is, we are all students. The teacher learns from the student learns from the teacher. Both are
Oh,
evolving. And
exactly.
that, so
Exactly.
it comes from a higher point of truth where you see that you are not the most important thing. You're just part of all this and
Yeah.
just like playing your part. And based on how humble you are, it gives you more. It gives
Yeah.
you like, because that's what it needs.
It's the I have nothing. And you know, from the background that I came from and to where I am now, I would not change a thing. And I see myself as this grain of sand
Mm.
that, when you look at a grain of sand, it looks like a diamond, doesn't it? If you looked at it in a microscope, it would appear to be this priceless jewel, and it captures the light, doesn't it? It's like a prism, and every
Understood.
angle of that prism is beauty and is a conduit for receiving knowledge, information, wisdom, sunlight, anything, joy,
Mm.
anything. And I feel if there's one thing I strive for is to be an open conduit. And I
Mm.
just say, I work for you. And even when I'm working
Mm.
with people, whether it's a crowd, like I have nothing. I have nothing. And I never doubt that I will be on stage. There's faces
Mm.
and eyeballs looking at me. And all I do is before I go on, or even the 2 days before, I'll say, Spirit, I know you're going to look after me. I'm just I'm humbled by the
Mm.
gifts that are being given, and that I know that you will help me to give and speak whatever the people in front of me need to hear. I am just the mouthpiece. And when I'm at that stage, and people laugh because I'm honest and I tell them this all the time. So I get on stage and I see all these eyeballs and I say, oh, I always say, there's no pressure, but all I see is eyeballs and so much expectation. And I just want you to know that I have nothing. And I
Mm.
and I just tune in. I said, so allow me to tune in, and I just start talking. Checking in. Like I'll ask a question. Do you know about mediumship? Where are people at with their
Mm.
development? And then literally within 3 minutes, 2 minutes, it's like straight away I'm drawn to somebody, and it's like, all right, get to work. you
Yeah,
know,
because you did mention spiritual currency. How I see it as is more like when there is a certain combination of people in a location, certain knowledges open up.
yes,
And that is crazy. Like my life as well, it have happened in a certain way, where you go into this place with this kind of people, and you are in this mode where you are channeling certain kind of energy.
mm-mm.
New knowledge opens up in a
Mm.
conversation, in an activity, and then you will be like, wow, so this is
Yeah,
how things work.
yeah.
Um, so
But
that
it's
that
incredible. It's incredible, isn't it? And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I interrupted you, but I always say to the audience, I say thank you to Spirit World. I pause at the end and I say, just let us send a thought out of gratitude for the messages that we've received, and that the
Mm.
presence of this, sacred, and to thank you as my audience, because it's their energy, their stories, whatever they drew them to sit. And I see people like they walk past, and before I know, there's people around the edges and they're listening, they're drawn in. People will say to me, you drew us in.
Mhm.
We can hear, you're so inspiring. I feel your passion. And I know the words that come out are right for this group. I could do the same thing like I do, every day for 3 days at that event. Different stories, different people, different focus.
Mm.
And I know when we had our chat last time, remember we talked about death, and I had the t-shirt
Yeah,
death.
yeah, yes.
And what I find is one of those demonstrations, I will always, because, I'm an end of life doula. So I help in
Mhm.
those transitions, that spiritual transition, and
Mhm.
passing the transition and leaving the physical body to help the people here that they're leaving, the families to whatever it is. And always that happens, that we talk about end of life, and that happens because it's important for spirit world to give that information for them, for you to understand, for us living people to understand, look, this is what's happening. Our soul is going to leave, but we also grieve until we join our consciousness, and yes, love still exists. And yes, we are around,
Another work you're doing is by providing that knowledge, they are aware of it, so they will follow it. So another thing that I understood, is it clear? I think
yes, you paused then for a minute and I was waiting.
So another thing I understood is more like when you give information about this world and how it works, and people would be aware of it before their death, and their
Yes.
soul will remember, and they would the next life, whatever life they takes, they would try to follow it. So it's not for everyone. It's when your time is right, the knowledge comes to you, and it is the start of seeking. You're gonna seek for the truth.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
and I believe in reincarnations, and how I see it is you start from where you stopped last time, and this
Yeah,
goes on, and
yeah,
this has so many different levels, and this goes on. So sometimes the spirit world uses people,
yeah,
and they explain like this world exists. You're going to
yes,
pass, but this exists, and then they die, and somehow maybe in teenage years, next life they'll be like, I have this feeling of there is a world outside.
yes, yeah, that's right. It's they're layers, aren't they? And the more clear you are, and eventually you learn, right, you know what? This kind of lifestyle, for me to have this, I need to live like this. Like you referred to, living clean, living with purity, living in this certain way. And we have to, right? Because as clear as our vibration, not hanging on at attachments, all these things make us heavy, make, our karma is there, all of this, all of those layers we need to be unburdened, don't we? We need to unburden ourselves.
And it's only by becoming that vessel that you can handle these energies.
Yeah.
So, and that's the reason we need to pure, because it's very strong. If your body's energy is not flowing as it should, it is going to cause diseases,
Exactly.
because it cannot, the cells cannot handle it.
That's
So
right.
that's why the energy never comes to the body if it is not the right vessel.
No.
It gives you preliminary things to do.
Yeah.
Like, give a knowledge, go seek, go
Yeah.
find, and then you understand, like, okay, for example, I shouldn't be eating animals because there
Yes.
is a lot of death and pain involved.
Mm.
And you come from a higher knowledge, you stop it. Like that, many steps have to pass before you become ready for these energies.
Yes.
It's not an easy, like, let's go and switch on and suddenly I'm enlightened. Sorry guys, it doesn't work
Let
like
me
that.
in. Oh no, totally. And like I've had many of those moments, where I've been really unwell, or I've had visions when I've been doing my practice and my rituals, and I've had the understanding, okay, spirit. And I've said, okay, it's and I say this when I'm working, is that it's like being on dial-up and you're trying to get NBN broadband, and so you've got to upgrade. You've got to do your upgrade. And I know that sometimes I've said, okay, I understand, spirit, that the power that's coming through, and I need to do some changes in my physical life, in my mental, emotional. Sometimes it's my physical body. So I've said, okay, I have to do a fast. I have to do some fasting. I have to do certain types of fasting to purify the body more. That will upgrade me.
Yes, because you're
It's
trying
beautiful.
to you're trying to become the nature of the energy itself, and that I
Yeah,
would say, at least the tantric way of looking at it, is that you are becoming the thing that you are trying to
yeah.
call the
That's a
energy.
beautiful
So
way.
that comes with what?
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing to say. That's a beautiful way to put it. You are trying to become the energy, that pure source, right?
Pure source. So there is all the spectrum of how to do it, and you are pushing as a human as much as you could to be close to it. And
Exactly.
it's not everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone have to do it. Some people have a lot of desire in this life, so they have to fulfill that. Because with desires, you would always be constrained. So fulfill what desires you have, live your life, and if you still feel like chasing it, then you are at the place to chase or
Yeah.
seek.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you know what, Pranoy, when you mentioned the other person, I was like, I have this dream that I want to, and it's been there for many years. Like I remember I must have journaled it, and every now and then it pops up that I want to visit the most like spiritual places of spiritual significance, and visit like the, we know this because we experience we know this in India, right? Of where there's sadhus or Buddhist monks or people who have practiced in these isolated places. I'm not talking like Varanasi or these places, Goa. I'm talking these isolated places where they are living a certain way of life to purify their vibration. And there is a high amount of metaphysical abilities in nature that happens in these places, right? Phenomena, actual phenomena. Yes. I've experienced phenomena. And I'm always like, if I can experience phenomena in this environment, and I know that I'm not suburbia, I'm not built up, all those, imagine what being in those places where all you're doing is practicing with the energy of another group of people doing the same thing with the same intention, the same focus. To me, I'm like, I want to go visit. I want to find these people. Let's do it, Pranoy.
But the thing I understand is more like the energy in a place is equal to the total energy divided by the amount of organisms, including humans, in it. So if it's like, for example, if you live in a flat where there's like 60 people living, the location might have a good energy, but it's constantly exhausted by the people living in it, and it's connected. So it goes up and down. Whereas if it's Himalayas, it is the mountain, and mountain itself is a god in a sense. And there is not many people around, and the people who go there are extreme level of sadhana or practices. So it's charged, and one way kind of that's the reason it isolates itself. It's like like the cold, the crazy terrain you have to pass. There is a reason people feel like, oh, this is like random. It's not random. There is a reason because it's for very specific things to do.
That's right. Yeah, and it's pure, isn't it? The energy is pure. The vibration is pure. You're in isolated. You're in nature, and it's like it's very it mirrors our spiritual journey, right? Nothing comes easily. You have to work really hard. You have to be consistent. You have to show up, and you have to have that determination. And it's same as if you were climbing and you were getting into one of those caves or ashrams or temples, right? But I have this desire. It reminded me of it. That I would love to be able to visit and be a part of their sacred ceremonies and just to observe and to experience.
Yeah, all you have to do, in my opinion, is to ask. And I know you know who to ask, because through this, this is what I believe. What happens is you get into a certain level of energy, and then you have a good communication, and you ask for a master or a guru, and it might not be a human master as well. It might be something else that's going to teach you. But when you are in that level, you ask, it comes. Because in that world, there is no space and timing.
No.
It's basically like endless, eternal bliss, or whatever it's called.
It's the multiverse, isn't it?
Yeah, like humans could see it in very different ways. What I'm saying is that when it's time and you ask, and if you show interest, things sync. And then you suddenly find yourself in the mountains. Like, what am I doing here?
Yeah. So, you know what? Pranoy, watch this space.
Yes. So let's go to the next thing. And this is like I would say, one of the final questions. What would you say as your end goal in this kind of practices or the things that you do? What would you say a destination to be?
My end goal, I don't believe in an end because it's infinite. So my aim is to always be true to the path and to my soul calling. Yeah. To be always in that space of, like you say, of receiving, humble, and to be an open conduit, and to do this calling for the connection to grow stronger, for me to always continue to listen to it. That is my infinite calling.
And it is beautiful way to explain. It's more like you want to be on the path because the path is endless, and you want to play your part, and you just follow where it leads.
And I am the path.
That's the crazy part. Even though we talk about energies and the world and things like that, you and the path is the same. You and that is the same. It is just that to get that conviction you are the path, you need to get into certain level of knowledge. So
Yeah.
you really believe you are the path.
Yeah. And yeah, I am at one with the path. I don't feel in my actions, daily actions, that I don't sit there and I say to myself, oh, I'm off the path right now. I'm always on the path, because the perception of being off it means that you are actually just on it, and you just, and I don't feel like that I'm doing things necessarily that are not taking me, like everything my whole life is built around being at one with the path. And so this is one thing that I'm learning, I'm practicing more and more, is to observe the present always in the path, because that's the path. The path is the journey. There is no destination, is there? There is no destination. Me being in the present and being at one with the path is the path.
Yeah. And this is the last question, what would you suggest for people who is interested in this kind of field? Like, for example, healing, like any kind of mediumship, or what would you suggest is a good first step for them to take to get into this?
My first step that I would really recommend to anybody is find a teacher, because you have to learn to be a student. And there is so much spiritual bypassing. There's so much ego, and there's so many people who are thinking that they are on the path when it's full of ego. And if you find the right teacher will help you to actually see.
True.
Just to see.
Yeah.
And if I was to give it an analogy, because I love working in archetypes, is if you haven't seen Doctor Strange, watch the movie, because from ego to energy and to understanding how to be was his journey, right? But he had a teacher and a guide. He had a guide, didn't he? And nobody made him do anything. They made him understand practice, focus, refocus, discipline, a new discipline that kind of rebuilt, right? It's a rebuilding of yourself. But you have to be guided by the right teacher. So my guidance to anybody is find the right teacher.
It's a good advice. I agree 100%. You need a teacher. But sometimes I feel like it might not be a physical teacher itself, which is a whole different topic to go into. So I don't want to go into that now, but it's more like also the willingness to be very open, like not judge people based on your limited understanding of the world.
That's right.
That is very, very important. And that's a trait number one of anyone who seek, because you need to understand how ignorant people you are, in a sense. And then you need to be like, there are things much above you and below as well. So be humble and be open to knowledge, and then knowledge will come.
Open to being a student. First of all, decide I am going to be a student, and trust when you send out that thought that I will receive the right teacher. And I hear what you're saying about sometimes the teacher is non-physical, but I feel that the non-physical teachers will come in the form of whatever, only when you have been a certain part of the path.
Yes.
Because as you know, our minds and thoughts are so powerful. We can make things up in our mind thinking it's our guides, which is a current thing happening in the world, right? And they're telling themselves, and I'm like, they're not telling you anything. There is no there. That is you speaking to yourself. And as a teacher of these arts, because my teaching ability opened as well. So not all mediums are teachers, not all mediums are healers. The most powerful mediums are the ones that are also healer, because they can manipulate and understand, work with, not manipulate, sounds quite dark, but it is manipulating energy, right? For the power of healing, for the power of mediumship, which is a different type of energy, different type of vibration, but also the teaching faculty is different as well. So not all mediums teachers. So again, I feel very humble that I can teach, that I understand the teaching components. And so, and I can see it's very hard. Like when I think about what I would have been like as a student, and I still am, there are very few people who would be open to be taught and to be a student and to receive and to just trust.
Yes.
Trust.
We have such a good time talking about it. And anyone who's listening, I would really ask you to check Sunita out and what she's up to, and try to follow her in social media as well, so you can understand and have more knowledge of this kind of fields. And thanks a lot for making the time to talk to me. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Pranam, shukriya. Om Shanti. Thank you so much, Pranoy. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a conversation with you, to have a connection with you. You know, we're both very switched on mentally and spiritually. I feel like we have that lovely, we're able to talk about beautiful, things that we've experienced, and very, as like you said, in the tantric field, in energy. It's very important, especially from a cultural perspective as well.
Give me a moment. I'm going to stop the recording, but we can talk. So guys, I hope you guys had a nice time listening.